So this musical periodic table is a new audiovisual musical instrument that takes the concepts of chemical spectroscopy and communicates them in a really engaging way using sound and music.
Hello, I'm Hadley Marchek from the American Chemical Society. Welcome to this media briefing from ACS Spring 2023. Hauntingly beautiful melodies aren't the first thing that most people think of when they look at the periodic table of the elements. But with a technique called data sonification, a recent college graduate has converted the visible light given off by the elements into beautiful audio. He's created unique and complex sounds for all of the elements, which is the first step towards an interactive musical periodic table. He calls this a new audiovisual instrument. We're joined today by Walker Smith from Indiana University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Walker, how did you get the idea for this project?
Well, believe it or not, I've actually been turning atoms and molecules into sounds for the past few years. I did my undergraduate as a dual degree in music composition and chemistry, so I was always looking for a way to turn my chemistry research into music. And eventually I stumbled across the visible spectra of the elements, and I just was overwhelmed by how beautiful, gorgeous, and how different they all look. And I thought, wow, it would be really cool to turn these visible spectra, these beautiful images, into sounds.
And so, how did you actually do this?
So the first step is figuring out how to convert light into sound, which sounds crazy. It sounds like a crazy idea, but it might not be that absurd because light and sound are both waves. The problem, though, is that they're different kinds of waves and different frequency ranges. So light is electromagnetic waves, whereas sound is, of course, sound waves. Um, but even if we pretend that these electromagnetic waves of light are waves of sound, they're still way above the human hearing range. So we need to scale them down. And then we can hear different frequencies of light, which we see as different colors, as different musical notes. So the fundamental question is, how do we turn light into sound? And light and sound both have distributions of frequencies. And with light or visible light, we see those different frequencies as different colors. But musically, we can hear those frequencies as different pitches or musical notes. And I have a fancy scientific instrument that converts the frequencies of light into sound. So this is the Light Soundinator 3000. Um, and it takes the different frequencies of light that we see as different colors and converts them to sound. So red light has the lowest frequency in the visible range. So it sounds like a lower musical pitch than violet. So if we move from red all the way up to violet, the frequency of the light keeps getting higher, and so does the frequency of the sound. And the one other really interesting thing about this rainbow xylophone, especially the way it's constructed, is that the mapping from sound or from light frequencies or colors to sounds is actually pretty accurate. So violet is almost double the frequency of red light. So it actually sounds close to a musical octave, which is this sound, this interval. So violet's a little less, so it sounds like a little lower.
And so, what do some of these elements sound like?
When I made this instrument and was listening to all of the elements, I was really amazed by the variety of sounds. So some of the simpler spectra, like hydrogen and helium, which only have a few lines, produce relatively simple chords that kind of just sound like vaguely musical chords. Um, but some of the more complex spectra can have hundreds or even thousands of lines, so they sound really dense and noisy. A lot of them kind of sound like like a spooky sound effect that you'd see in like a cheesy horror movie sound effect or something like that. Um, but they all have their own unique sound and collection of frequencies.
Do you have a favorite one out of all of them that you've heard?
Yeah, I think my favorite might actually be a tie between helium and zinc. So those aren't random. So helium makes this interesting scale. So if you listen to the frequencies one by one instead of all at once, you get an interesting scale pattern that I have used to make a couple compositions, including a helium dance party. So it's very, very groovy, very fun. And then my other tie for first place is probably zinc. Because all of the elements around it, the first row transition metals, are really dense and have just very complex, dense kind of like grating sounds. But zinc, for whatever reason, despite having a large number of frequencies, is this like angelic, pretty sound that sounds like, an angelic vocalist singing with vibrato.
Oh, that's really fun. So what sort of applications then do you think this sort of interactive musical periodic table would have?
So I think the main applications that I am interested in and have been exploring are science communication and research and data analysis. So on the science communication side, this is a really unique and engaging way that combines visuals and sound and communicates this relatively obscure concept of like electron energy levels that not many people are super familiar with. But it shares that in a really beautiful and interesting way and helps people create connections between sound, light, and chemistry. So I found it to be a really effective science communication tool for reaching people of all ages. But I'm also interested in the potential for giving us new avenues to understand these data. We typically look at, or we really only look at spectroscopy data visually, either with colors or with graphs for regions of the spectrum that we can't see the colors for. But our ears are actually really good at picking out information from complex signals. I mean, when you think about listening to a band, your ear can pick out the vocalist or the guitar or the drummer from the complex sound that you're hearing. So your ears are always doing really complex real time signal processing. So there's a lot of potential, I think, for using this. As an analysis tool.
And could this also help in the classroom with teaching those with visual impairments?
Yeah, definitely. So there's actually already been some research that's been done in Journal of Chemical Education on other types of spectroscopy, and they found sonification to be really effective at allowing students with visual impairments to interpret these data. But I think this goes even beyond that because even for students that don't have visual impairments, we could still use this as an alternative or supplementary means of data analysis and perhaps glean some more information or different types of information from these spectra using our ears in addition to our eyes.
And so what are the next steps then for your project?
So I'm currently working with Wonder Lab Museum in Bloomington, where I've presented a few performances called "The Sound of Molecules," and I'm working with them to develop a physical museum exhibit that would let people interact with this and listen to elements and sort of like make their own music with the elements.
And at the ACS Spring 2023 meeting, you're also going to be presenting a show that's going to feature some of these elements, correct?
Yes, yeah, I'm presenting the Sound of Molecules show on Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Great. And finally, do you have a takeaway that you want people to have from our discussion today?
I think the main thing I want people to walk away with is just this idea that maybe science and the arts aren't so different after all, and I think combining them and thinking of ways to merge them together can lead to new ways to new research questions, but also new ways to communicate and reach larger audiences.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Walker, for sharing your research with us.
Thank you for having me.
Be sure to check out our other media briefings for ACS Spring 2023, which will be posted throughout the meeting at www.acs.org/ACS Spring 2023 briefings.